Hello nerds and nerdettes, welcome back to the channel, where today we will have another top 5 list for you guys. The topic of discussion for today's video will be top 5 best omnibuses to start with, pertaining to specifically Marvel Comics. Each one of these are going to be great jumping on points, great starting points when getting into the collected editions world or comic books really in general. Even if you don't get these specific omnibuses, then you can at least read these specific stories and it'll still be a great jumping on point for the character that said story focuses on or is about. A couple of quick disclaimers. I am going to label this as top 5, but I will have an honorable mention. I'll kind of explain why it's an honorable mention rather than actually fitting in the list. But also, if you are interested in getting any of these books or any collected editions in general, feel free to head on over to Organic Priced Books. I'll leave the link in the description below. You can use code STAYNERDY for $2 off your order at checkout. Very great, reputable company. You will have very beautiful packaging, and it'll get to you in a timely manner, and there's nothing better than that when trying to actually order these items. But with that being said, we can go ahead and jump and start with the honorable mention. And the honorable mention is, of course, the trilogy that is Onslaught, Heroes Reborn, and Heroes Return. We can peel back this volume here. Really great jumping on point. Marvel, unlike DC, usually sticks to soft reboots, but this is the closest Marvel has gotten to a hard reboot for their universe. Pretty much the events of Onslaught take place, everything you need is collected in this omnibus to really understand what's going on. It then immediately jumps to Heroes Reborn, which covers the Marvel heroes in a different universe. It pretty much is a world that Image Comics created because the characters were essentially kind of pawned off for a year to Image Comics. And then immediately following this volume, we then have Heroes Return, or Heroes Reborn, The Return, immediately following that. So this is pretty much a trilogy and very close to a hard reboot. After the events that do take place, you have a new status quo, a new era for the heroes that are affected. And because of those reasons, it makes it fairly decent of a jumping on point. The main reason that I am keeping it as an honorable mention is because it is technically a 3-volume set. To get the most from this entire story, reading all 3 is probably your best bet, but it's also not that great of a story. Very good art throughout, somewhat enjoyable and fun, but there's much better reads in the Marvel comic world, so I didn't want this to take up a spot on the top 5, and instead get a little bit of an honorable mention and then keep it moving. But that is, of course, the Onslaught, Heroes Reborn, and Heroes Return, or the Onslaught Trilogy Omnibus Set, which is what I like to call it, and that is our honorable mention. So we can go ahead and head to number 5, which is, of course, going to be The Amazing Spider-Man by J. Michael Straczynski, or JMS. It's a 2-volume set. This is obviously volume 1. Amazing stuff. This is arguably one of the best runs, a lot of people's fan favorites run. Probably my favorite run on the character. It is decently loved, but gets a lot of flack for the ending. For those of you that have read it, you probably know exactly what I'm referencing. One More Day. But really good stuff. Very enjoyable run. You have a huge character introduction that plays a huge role in Dan Slott's run. A older Spider-Man that's in his kind of mid-20s, has a job, still struggling, has the Peter Parker look and everything like that, but a lot more relatable for a mid-20s kind of mid-age reader, and it's really something. The art is probably the thing that I don't feel too strongly about because it is John Romita Jr. Through a decent amount, if not all, of the run in entirety. So his art is definitely, you're either a fan or you're not, and that's something that you definitely have to keep in mind when going into this specific omnibus or this specific run really in general. But it's very fun. I think it breathes life into the character once again, giving him a new meaning to life, no longer that 15, 16-year-old kid that's struggling with high school drama. Makes him much more relatable, much more realistic to those that are reading comic books, and it's really great stuff. This does take place in the 2000s, so Civil War era, and so a lot of impactful arcs, events, and storylines were taking place in the Marvel Universe kind of during this run, which makes it kind of fun as well. But a lot of fun, really good stuff. Volume 1 just got reprinted a little bit ago, so it shouldn't be too hard to track down, but it is a great omnibus, a great story, and one of my personal favorite runs on the character of Spider-Man. But we can go ahead and move to number 4, which is going to be The Incredible Hulk by Peter David. This is volume 1 of 4 volumes that are currently out. A 5th volume is announced, or a companion. I'm not too sure what the proper term will be, but this is probably the definitive point to jump on the Hulk. This is what brings Hulk and the kind of villain of the week style of story that Hulk was essentially stuck in, and breathes once again life into the character, which is a very common theme for everything on this list. This book specifically gives Hulk characteristics, a mindset, a relationship between Hulk and Bruce Banner, as well as a fairly decent and vast supporting cast, and it really thrusts you into the world of the Hulk, catches you up to speed. Anything that happens prior to the run kind of gives you a brief synopsis on, and make sure you understand the cliff notes before moving forward. But it's probably the run that most people think of when they think of what made Hulk popular, what made Hulk a good comic. It's typically this run. Peter David making Hulk a very complex character. Early work as when it comes to art by Todd McFarlane, Jeff Purvis. A lot of iconic covers and fights throughout this entire run. Volume 1 being somewhat dated and a little bit of a snore fest early on, kind of got pushed through, but once you get to Volume 2 and from there on out, it is really good stuff. This specific volume kind of covers the entire Joe Fixit arc, so if you ever wondered what that was, this explores that, and it is a lot of fun and probably the best, if not the definitive part or story arc, run, writer to jump on to the character of Hulk and start reading. But that's The Incredible Hulk by Peter David at number 4, so we can jump to number 3, which is Captain America by Mark Waid, Ron Garney, and Andy Kubert. Probably my personal favorite run on the character, but once again, this is a run that breathes new life into the character. Like I said, common theme. This taking place during the Heroes Return era of Marvel, so actually taking place during that trilogy set. Captain America coming back into a world that is familiar yet not at the same time, and Mark Waid doing away with the Captain America that fought doppelgangers or fought terrorist organizations, and instead thrusting him completely into superhero comics, having him fighting cosmic level entities, beings, aliens, you name it. Also updating his shield, which a lot of people hated, giving him an energy shield rather than the actual metal shield that we all know and love, or vibranium. Very fun character, a lot of things explored, a lot of chances taken throughout this omnibus, and I think where this omnibus is really successful is when it comes to what Captain America represents, what he is really about, as well as the man under the mask, Steve Rogers, and his supporting cast, and kind of how they go about not only their everyday lives, but being held to certain standards, as well as coming down to reality and really explaining what their purpose is as Captain America, as the patriot, the star-spangled hero that we all know and love, and what he truly represents as a hero. And that is probably the main reason I love this run, this omnibus, this entire story, because it really just shows how important Captain America is in the Marvel Universe and why he is considered the greatest hero in the Marvel Universe. And if you want to get into the character, there's no better place to start, because this is a new era and it completely introduces everything about the character, every aspect about the character, including a few new ones. So great jumping on point, and my favorite run on Captain America ever, Mark Waid by Ron Garney and Andy Kubert. But we can go ahead and jump to number 2, which is going to be a quick step away from superhero comics and jumping into the Star Wars world, which is Darth Vader by Charles Soule. A great jumping on point for not only Darth Vader, but the Star Wars world in comic book format, because as long as you've seen episode 1 through 3, you can start this comic book. It pretty much picks up right at the end credits scene of episode 3, where Vader pulls himself off the gurney, Ron Garney, and goes from there. You get to learn really about what Darth Vader is struggling with in his own mindset and through the Force. You get to see the actual death and rise of Darth Vader, or death of Anakin and rise of Darth Vader, that is referenced in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. And you get to literally get a huge deep dive into Darth Vader's psyche and what he's really about and his motives, as well as his early days becoming the deadly Sith that we all know and love in New Hope and Rogue One, etc., etc. And it is really something special. It's typically not talked about as much because there's another run by Kieran Gillen that typically casts a very large shadow over the character of Darth Vader, where a lot of runs don't necessarily hold up. But this is my personal favorite run on the character, but also happens to be probably the best jumping on point for a Darth Vader comic, being that you can literally jump from the movies straight into this comic book, which is the best aspect or the best possibility ever for a starting point, because most people have seen episodes 1 through 3 and probably even the earlier Star Wars movies as well. So if you've at least seen 1 through 3, the prequels, this is your book. This is where you want to begin, and then you can go from here. There's not a clear timeline following this book either. It's kind of just a two-parter that covers this run and then just kind of stops, and then you go from there to obviously Rogue One, New Hope, etc., etc. But really good stuff. I know there's 2 hardcovers. There's also this omnibus, which is a single volume. The previous one is also a single volume, forgot to mention that. But very, very fun story. I think it builds very much on the character of Darth Vader and the mythos of Star Wars, especially pertaining to the character of Darth Vader. And it's a must read if you're a Star Wars fan and you want more lore behind the Emperor and Darth Vader's relationship, and kind of how Anakin became the character or the man or the Sith of Darth Vader. And that's exactly why it's at number 2. The only reason really it jumped over that previous omnibus is just because there's no better point to really start reading Darth Vader. If this picks up after the movies, you can jump right in. And I've probably said that a million times, but that's number 2. So you can go ahead and jump to number 1, which I feel like a lot of you guys can probably guess, which is none other than Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1. There's 2 volumes out currently, but I'm going to broad brush this a little bit and say really anything Ultimate Comics for Marvel is probably the best starting point for omnibuses, reading comics, whatever it may be. And that's mainly because of the fact that you can pick up issue 1 and just keep reading through the issues. There's no in between. There's no middle or side story that needs to be covered or expanded or read before you can continue. You just pick up issue 1 and you keep it moving. Very good stuff as well. You have Brian Michael Bendis doing a lot of the writing, Mark Bagley doing the amazing art, but same thing with the other Ultimate Comics, which is X-Men. We have the Ultimates. We also have Ultimate Comics Avengers. A lot of those were in by Mark Miller, but a realistic, somewhat grounded take on a lot of the Marvel characters that we know and love, still keeping them as superheroes with superpowers, but giving them a little bit more of a, like I said, grounded origin and beginning to not only the heroes, but the villains as well. And it's a lot of people's favorite comics ever, especially Ultimate Spider-Man. A lot of people don't like it because it does deviate a lot from the source material of 616, your standard Marvel Universe. But if you go in blind, you go in fresh, you're going to get a lot out of it and really enjoy your reading experience. I highly recommend this to people that not only want to jump into the comics, but are fans of the movies. You're going to notice while reading that there's a lot of things pulled panel for panel from the comic books and added into the MCU movies, as well as the pre-MCU Marvel movies. And so if you like those stories and you really want to get into the comics, but you want something similar to that, this is probably your best bet. This or any Ultimate Comics. And it really catches you up to speed. You don't have as much history or backstory to a lot of the storylines. It's much more fast-paced and enjoyable. If you don't want deep dives into what happened 30 years ago, then these are typically going to be the runs for you in the Ultimate Comics. But that is number one, so that does wrap up our list. So thank you so much for watching. As always, if you could do me a favor, definitely subscribe to join the Illuminati. You can get us to 500 subscribers, where we will be celebrating with a giveaway. Half of the battle to be put into the raffle for said giveaway will obviously be being subscribed. So that will probably help out a lot, and it will definitely be a giveaway you won't want to miss. If you're in the collected editions game, it is a very rare kind of out-of-print book that I don't see often, so that's very exciting to give out to one of you guys. But I would also really appreciate if you hit that bell icon. It really helps the algorithm and helps the channel grow. But other than that, thank you so much, and of course, stay nerdy.